Good morning, LinkedIn. My name is Joel Bennett, and I'd like to welcome you to this episode of Practical Leadership, an opportunity for you to learn how to be a more effective leader and to build leadership habits into your daily work. If you are tuning in live or watching the recording, I'd love it if you'd say hello in the comments and tell us where you're tuning in from. We're starting to see a few more folks from outside the US, Canada, Australia joining us, so it's always fun to see where people are connecting with us from. So if you joined us last week for our session with Catherine Harrison on human-centered leadership, I'd love it if you could also share how you've been more focused on people in this last week. So don't be shy, introduce yourself, and we look forward to having you here. During these sessions, if you've not been a part of this before, we try to tackle real leadership problems and challenges that you could be having, encourage you to apply what you're learning, and provide actionable steps for you to build into your own leadership journey. I've asked leadership experts from around the world to join me to provide their own perspectives and experiences. And today I'm excited to be joined by Nurdan Tokoz, Behaviour Change Expert at Nurdanpinar Solutions for Human Performance, where she helps companies remove the barriers that they have that may hinder team performance. Thanks for joining me, Nurdan.
Thank you for having me, Joel.
It's great to see you again. Today, our topic is going to be on battling the fear of change, something that we all struggle with, both individually and within our teams at work. And I'm excited to get Nurdan's thoughts on this. But before we get started, I want to reinforce again that we'd love for you to be an active participant in this. We would love this to be a dialogue, not just between Nurdan and I, but with you as well. So please share your perspectives, your questions along the way. If you're watching this as a recording, we don't want you to miss out. Feel free to drop your questions or comments in as well, and I'll answer them as soon as we're done with the session. So let's see who's wandered in since we've gotten started. Joe Tomaselli, good to see you, Joe. You're one of our favorite people too. Is it Nafis maybe Khan from India?
India.
Fantastic. I think you may be our first visitor participant from that part of the world. Jennifer, great to have you on here as well. Sonia, Jesse, it's been a long time. I haven't seen you in a bit. Thanks for being a part of this. So it looks like we've got a pretty good group assembling. I want to make sure that we stay on time. So let's get started. Nurdan, before this session, I posted something on LinkedIn just about what I feel to be maybe two conflicting truths in the workplace. One of which is that change is inevitable, and the other is that people are afraid of change. So what kind of fear can get in the way of us accepting or even engaging with the change process?
Yeah, that is the reality of the world, I think, in nowadays. Change is everywhere, and it is not a one-time project anymore. It's ongoing. And humans are wired to fear the unknown. When there is unknown, uncertainty, that fear feeling happens, which is automatically happening. It's not under our control. Our body just gets into the mode of protecting for an upcoming threat. So we're going to talk more about the details of that, but fear is always there when there's uncertainty. Of course, uncertainty is everywhere at the macro level, at the global economic health, geopolitical crisis, and natural disasters, and bank issues now coming up recently. I mean, it keeps coming. Of course, that fear can be for different reasons. Fear of losing the job, fear of losing your business, fear of losing control, fear of losing autonomy, fear of losing the relationship, fear of financial factors. So all those things, will I get that job? Is this venture going to be successful? Or am I on the right career path at the personal level, at the micro level? Or, hey, there's a new competitor in the market. How is my business going to deal with that? Or the structure is changing. We're getting new management. How is that going to work? Am I going to get more work because of the process changes? I already have a lot. Or are they going to announce that we have to go to work now every day full time? How am I going to manage my family? These are all the things that come together with that fear. And it is nerve breaking. It is exhausting. And one thing, though, we need to think about when there's uncertainty, unknown, and if you think of the possibilities and opportunities, those are really the two sides of the coin. When there's an uncertainty, it doesn't mean it's a loss. It is something gone, end of things. But we need to flip the coin and look the other side to see the possibilities and opportunities.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I think too, and I teed this up as more of a workplace piece, but I mean, you talked about the personal side of this. Most of us would say we don't like change even in our personal lives, right? Although I always joke with people, we don't like change unless we're the ones that are wanting to change something, right? When you think about that kind of the physical response or that brain's response to change, I think for a lot of people, this like a lack of confidence around things, even the way it can create team dynamic issues, some dysfunctions in teams. A lot of that does kind of come from this aspect of fear. And I know you do a lot of work with teams around change. What are some examples that you've seen where that fear of change and how that is kind of played out in the team itself to create some dysfunction?
Yeah. When we talk about fear, the body's reaction is the same when a caveman sees a bear running toward him, or when we're sitting in a meeting room in the boardroom and hearing a change is coming. The body shows exactly the same reaction. Under that stress and fear, the amygdala, the primitive part of our brain, takes the control, which it's called the amygdala hijack. And the things happening after that is exactly the same for those two situations. Can we stop body giving those reactions? No. It is automatically happening. This is what happens, really. It is interesting when I heard about that. The veins, the arteries in the brain shrink to send more blood to the arms and legs. Because under that threat for survival, there are two behaviors we are expecting. One is fight, the other one is flight. To be able to do that, our arms and legs should be strong, full of blood. Liver releases sugar into the bloodstream. Why? Because it needs that energy. Respiratory system gets faster. Why? To get more oxygen, to burn that sugar and give the strength to the cells. And heart pumps harder to send the blood. Blood pressure goes up. And the one interesting thing is our peripheral sight cells, they stop sending messages to the brain because the person is totally focused on the threat. So they don't really need to see their peripheral. And also auditory exclusion is another thing. We stop hearing things other than our enemy, the threat over there. So this happens automatically. Of course, the adrenaline glands secrete adrenaline and cortisol levels gets higher. And the body is so ready to attack that bear or run away from it. This is a good reaction. If this reaction is not there, then we should get worried. Then we cannot protect ourselves. We cannot survive. This is the survival in any kind of situation. But the point is, how long do we want to stay in this state? How long do we want to shut our ears and sight to everything and just in our own fear and anxiety and stress, just struggle over there? Because we cannot make decisions at that point. We cannot solve problems. We cannot communicate effectively. We cannot be creative. Amygdala is working, and that's all amygdala can do. So until we get to the prefrontal cortex, which progressively shuts down in this situation, we're in that fear state.
So if I were to find myself in that meeting, where whether something's being announced, a new idea is being rolled out, and I find myself becoming hesitant to lean into that, and whether I feel like that's a fear piece or I kind of start to get that fight response, what are some other ways I could determine if I'm allowing fear to create barriers to me accepting change or engaging with change?
Yeah. I just want to ask the group too, and if you have experienced this, please put a plus in the comments. Have you ever experienced a time when you come out of a meeting when things were just changing and they announced it and you're not sure, there's uncertainty? You come out and you just say, what did we talk in that meeting? What happened? I can't even remember the parts of it. Who said what? Do you have that experience in the past? You can put a plus in the comments if you have. I had a lot. Or when you announce a change to your team, you just see people looking at you. Huh? These happen. And those moments are when you are in that fear zone. You are totally focused to the threat. It's not that people are reacting to, thank you. People are not reacting to the change or resisting to it. They're not there yet.
Yeah.
And of course, in a meeting room, you cannot really fight with your fists or you cannot slam the door and leave. But how you can fight is you argue. You just ask questions. You become anxious and you can sabotage negative comments on it. That is the way you can fight in that environment, or people fight. Or they just flight mode, get disengaged.
Yeah.
Looking at the phone, scribbling something on the paper, or just looking at the infinity. You don't even know where they are.
Yeah.
Those are the flight mode. So when this happens, there are a couple things. We should be happy that we are feeling this in our cases and our team is feeling this. This is a good thing. We should be worried if we don't feel that. Then it means there's something wrong. Either we don't care or physically something is not happening. Whatever the case. So it's a good thing. We feel fear and we have all these changes in the body. Breathing out, there's this exercise apparently really impacts the cortisol levels in your bloodstream. And I want to share that with you. Taking a breath, breathe through your nose, take it in, counting 3. And let it go out through your mouth, count to 6. When this happens, you are really lowering the cortisol levels in the bloodstream. That is why people always say, hey, before you react, just count to 10. Take a deep breath. This is all where it is coming from. Physically, it is necessary. And of course, giving people that 90-second time off going through this fear process, which is body does that, or yourself giving that opportunity, but then feeling, okay, I need to ask a couple questions about this to learn more. Now we're coming to the executive brain, getting out of that hijack of amygdala and becoming more decision-making, problem-solving mode and communicating properly too. That comes up. When we are calmer, these capabilities of brain come back. And one thing we need to be aware at that moment too, is this fear coming from a memory of the past fear? Or if it is a new fear? Something just happened yesterday. I want to share that with you, how I and I was kind of proud of myself. I was able to do it. Hey, I said, I walk the talk. Anyways, I proved that to myself. I have a big dentist anxiety, but it is a real anxiety, a big fear. Whenever I go to dentist, I get shakes. Then they have to put needle and freeze it for any small procedure they need to do because I cannot sit. Okay, so yesterday was the last day of another procedure. I had to go and they had to complete it. But a couple days before that, I started thinking about it. So Why am I afraid of this? What happens? So, yeah, well, it may hurt. Okay, then so what? Or it may not work well. Well, the dentist is there. She's a very skilled dentist. I trust her. She'll figure it out. It's not my point to figure it out. And I just kept talking to myself about that, did this exercise. And this is one thing to build that habit, I will ask you too. Okay, why am I afraid of it? What happens? And if it happens, so what? And yesterday, I sat on that chair and I turned to Dr. Lissault. I said, Dr. Lissault, I don't need the needle today. Wow, she said. She was scared. The fear was in her side now. She said, are you sure? Yep, I am sure. No needles today. And we got through the procedure. I didn't even flinch. Didn't. I just sat there, calm, and she was in the biggest shock, congratulated me. We hugged each other, and I left the dentist office.
That's fantastic.
So it is all that practice and habit building. Why am I afraid of this? What happens? Because when you do a list of things like that, you just figure out some of the fear that you think is a fear is not really a fear. Yeah. And some of the things outside of your control, you really do not need to worry about that piece. But the part you can control, you can get out of that 90 seconds. I'm not saying cancel the 90 seconds. No, that is going to happen in any ways. And with people, it will happen. But we can pull them out there. We can pull ourselves out there and build this habit.
Yeah. I want to reinforce something you said earlier, and I'll be the first to admit a number of years ago, I was not very good at this. When a change was announced, when something felt like it pushed me beyond my comfort zone, I had somebody else talk to me about, hey, you need to do some breathing, right? You need to do some deep breathing. And I was not really open to that. I thought it was kind of wooey. And then I talked to somebody in the military who had a long career in the military, had served multiple times overseas, and he talked about tactical breathing. And tactical breathing it's a little bit different. Box breathing, it's a 3 or 4 count in, you hold it for 3 or 4, you let it out for 3 or 4, and then you hold it again. But his whole piece was that, right? It's not about me just getting centered. Mm-hmm. It's also about my body's response to that breathing. And so I actually started using it after that, and it's had fantastic results. The other piece with that I really love, you talk about fight or flight. I've noticed a number of times, again, whether it's in meetings or one-on-one, when you are talking about a change, you're going to get the people that argue. And to me, sometimes that's the best thing because they're actively engaged in it. But you're also going to get the people who, as you talked about, flight. And sometimes what you're going to see is the people that kind of freeze, right? They don't know what to think. They don't make a sound. You can't read anything from them. You're also going to get the people who appease, where I always kind of relate this to pets, but when your dog, if you yell at your dog for eating food off the table, it'll freeze sometimes, but it'll also kind of appease. It'll show you its belly. It'll be like, okay, I'm not going to push back on this. And sometimes you're going to get that from teams as well, where they're just like, okay, whatever you say, but that's a disengagement behavior as well. Yeah. And so when we see those behaviors in other people, we have to recognize that, hey, their brain has triggered, that threat response. And then how do we interact with that going forward? So that's maybe probably my last question for you, Nurdan, is, so as I see this fear of change in myself or others, what are some ways I can engage in those opportunities that change may be able to provide for me? Do you have any tips for those that may be battling that themselves?
With the teams, one thing that really works when we do this work together is just bringing out that emotion. There are so many times when groups, I feel that fear is really shutting them down. They're in the kind of flight mode, or freeze is part of that flight mode too. So it's a way of flight. So when I feel those, I just kind of stop there talking about the change. Because so many times I said, okay, so this is coming. This new regulatory change is coming. It is really impact our process, your processes. But before going into that, tell me what really makes you uncomfortable with this change. And at one time, although it was a long program, we spent almost 2 hours, 3 hours writing about their fear on the flip charts. People kept saying, I kept writing. People kept saying, I kept writing. When it was all out, then I said, okay, these are all valid comments, valid concerns, and we're going to touch them all as I explain how this change is going to go and the benefits of it you're going to see at the end. And this was a duration of a program. It wasn't only one session. When we finished the program, I had 4 generations in the room. And that was one of the biggest issue. Everybody was just in it and getting the information how to make this change in their processes and programs. I think recognizing and acknowledging that fear opens people and increases the trust for the leader too, because you really care about their fear, how they feel about this. And you acknowledge and you give them the opportunity to talk about that fear. And it really works. Instead of bypassing it, oh, they will be fine, they will get through this. And sometimes it helps for people to get back to their desks or back to out of the meeting and having a follow-up meeting after that. Just kind of, okay, now how are you feeling?
Yeah.
Maybe the next day, maybe 2 days after. What are you thinking? What is in your head? This is not a rush thing. We cannot implement change. We cannot introduce change in a rush. We need to go with the natural acceptance of the people's bodies.
Right. I think too with that, I liked your tip of kind of writing that out. I think as you mentioned, the brain kind of goes into it. It pours all of its energy into certain parts, like, you know, that threat response of getting me ready for this threat. And at some point we have to kind of get us back to our rational brain, right? So for me to sit down and go, well, based on what you just said, here are all the things that I'm concerned about or worried about, or the cause and effect of this.
Yeah.
When I start writing some of those things down and I kind of put the rational and the concrete down on paper, sometimes I recognize that those things that seem really big are not really as big as I thought. Or,
Exactly.
you know, hey, you know, if this happens, I may lose my job. And then I sit down and go, well, wait a second, there are 25 steps that are going to be happening between now and me losing my job. A small percentage of what I'm really probably afraid of.
Yeah.
Sometimes what I'm afraid of is, you know, the hard work that's going to go along with, you know, the change, or not being very good at something for a while until I get good at it.
Yeah.
So I love that, being able to write it, because that gets it down on paper so that I can actually interact with it instead of it just swimming in my mind.
Yeah, exactly. And also when you write things, I always write, not only for fear or anything. Whenever I get confused, I write, and it just clears up so many things in my head. And like you said, hey, it's not that big of a thing. Or what is the possibility of happening this? Am I just kind of thinking so far something there, and maybe so many things will change in between and it's not even going to happen? Why worry about it? So it is important to put our energy in a positive, constructive way instead of wearing ourselves out for some things that may not even occur.
Right.
And having that, of course, this is a habit. And that building the proper habits will provide that balance. Whenever it is a self-awareness, to be able to regulate our emotions, first we need to, like we all know, to be aware of it. Then we can regulate it. So this exercise really helps you to be aware of what is the fear and how you can regulate it. It comes with that hand in hand.
Yeah.
It's a muscle to build.
Yeah. Well, we've got a couple of comments that have come in. Joe Tomaselli talked about, a great example of this was the World Trade Center event, which was an impact of radical change in the workplace. He also mentions that, a common workplace fear of change has to do with the fear of losing control. And I can definitely relate to that. I think for many of us, and it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, right? I hate change unless it's the change I want to make, right? So it's comfortable for me when I am driving change, or I feel like it's going to be helpful to me. But when it comes from somebody else, I don't feel like I can in control of that. So I'm more fearful of it.
Yeah, and instead of resisting change, we cannot live in this world and survive and thrive if we resist change. It is our reality. It is not something once in a lifetime event. It is happening every day, and we need to have that agility, that flexibility to being able to adapt, to have our mindset in the organizations, to have our culture ready for it, to build that mindset and culture, and make the systems ready for any change coming. And of course, anticipating change is the biggest thing over here, really looking out and saying, okay, what can happen? Those anticipation is critical too. When we're ready for change, I think the fear piece of it we can overcome easier because we have our culture, mindset, people, and systems can handle the change. So it is easier to manage that throughout the organization, throughout the teams.
Well, Nurdan, I'm looking at the clock and I'm realizing we're winding down on time. So as always, we want to end with just some practical ways that people can start with small steps to start moving in the right direction, to build this habit of embracing change, or at least working with change, leaning into change in their day-to-day life. So what's one simple step that they could start to practice over the next 7 days to start building this behavior?
Accept the fact that your body will have fear when there is uncertainty. That is a healthy thing. We should be happy about it. If our teams and ourselves have those kind of reactions, we should embrace it. Then we should guide our teams to get out of it after that. We call it 90 seconds, but sometimes it's 90 minutes, sometimes it's 90 hours. It all depends how much people want to stay there. But to get them out of that state easily, we can support them and open the environment, make it a safe environment to talk about how they feel, what is bothering them, and bringing the answers accordingly so they can put a check beside it and get rid of that fear and start being productive again.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, gang, as we wind down today, LinkedIn can be used for a lot of things. And I've said over and over again here, what I'd like it to be used for today, at least during this session, is a chance for you to create some sort of catalyst for action. And for some of you, this is not a new topic. Maybe it's a bit of accountability. So you invested the time today to learn more about effective leadership and specifically about battling your fear of change or the fear of change in others. But that investment is going to be completely wasted unless you do something with it. So with that in mind, I'd ask that you identify one thing that you could commit to doing around this topic of battling fear or change, something you can do in the next 7 days before our next session. And once you have that, drop it in the comments. Make it super practical, make it super simple, something you could start with even as soon as today, so that you can start gaining some momentum with this habit. So take 15 seconds now, drop that into the comments. We'd love to see what you're going to be working on. And while you're doing that, I want to thank Nurdan for being with us today. It's so great having you here and talking about something that we all battle and something that you're so passionate about. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. I really love your series of interviews, Joel. And if I cannot be there physically, I definitely watch, and I get a lot of tips and good points to work on. So I really appreciate the program, and thank you for inviting me today.
That's very kind. Thank you. Well, with that, if you want to get a hold of Nurdan and learn more about her work, I'd encourage you to reach out to her on LinkedIn. She also does some great job of posting fantastic information and updates on what she's working on. So give her a follow. And that brings us to next week. We'll continue our focus on change, and I'm excited to announce that Alyssa Burkus will be joining me to explore the topic of how writing can help us lead others through change. So keep your eyes on our LinkedIn event postings, or you can drop me a note in the comments, and I'd be happy to invite you personally. If you stumbled upon this video, whether it's from the recommendation of somebody else or just happened to see it on the LinkedIn feed, and we're not connected on LinkedIn, send me a meeting request, or send me a connection request, mention the show, and we can remedy that. So again, I'd like to encourage you to take something you took out of today's session, put it into practice as soon as today, and be the leader that your team needs from you right now. But regardless, I want to thank you again for joining us, and I hope to see you again next week. Blessings.
Thank you.